Thank you, Kang. First of all, I wish to record my appreciation and thanks to the DAP for the invitation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So we are here tonight to review this DNA Identification Act 2008. Yeah. So this act is also related very intimately with forensic DNA data bank Malaysia. Okay. So of course, these days, almost everybody is an expert on DNA. I think because of CSI, everybody has an idea that he knows a lot, or he or she knows a lot about DNA. But having said that, I would just want to, before we talk about the law, I think I'd like to go through some technical aspect of it, because I'm actually more a science person than a law person. So when you talk about a DNA data bank, how do we build DNA data bank? The impression is, if somebody say, I want your DNA, it doesn't mean that you'll get DNA straight from your body. It doesn't work like that. So what it means is that if the police wants DNA from you, or anybody wants the DNA from you, what is important is to collect biological material from you, from any human. Okay? So once you get a biological, it's a starting material. So please bear in mind the trend, what is involved. Okay? So once you get your biological material at whatever, either at the scene of crime or from a suspect, then that material has to be properly maintained, preserved, and then taken to the lab and processed in the lab. So biological material can be like your blood, your sperm, your hair, whatever you have, your skin, the saliva, alright, anything, any biological material, cell, basically. Okay, then a chemist or scientist in the lab or technician has to make use of the material and extract DNA through a number of processes, steps, and then once you get the DNA, that's not the end of the story. You cannot get all information there. That will have to go to a machine. I mean, CSI you have seen, they put it into a machine, but CSI is very short, very brief, right? But it's not so fast like that. Then you get the data coming out. Once your data comes out, then you have to interpret the data properly. Sometimes the data are not easy to interpret. So you need some experience to interpret the data. Currently in the world, there are 3 types of data, at least. I mean, there are more, but at least there are 3 major types. You can get what you call, when you say about DNA profiles, these are based on what you call the codice. You get markers. Markers are just basically from the DNA we can get data out of that. Okay, and these are what we call the markers we get. And we can get general markers or from the male, we have male and female. From male, because all male has a particular chromosome. You are male because of the Y chromosome. We can get specific information from the Y chromosome. That's called SDR markers, specifically for males. And since a lot of males are involved in basically crimes, so this sort of information is very important in others. I mean, that's the statistics. Okay. Then there's also another data we can get from mitochondria. Mitochondria is another small material in all our cells, and we generally inherit our mitochondria from our mother. Generally fathers don't give mitochondria. So that allows us to trace. That kind of information allows us to trace a family, to know that you come from a particular family, from the maternal line. So that's called mitochondria, or called mtDNA. Don't worry too much about the details. So basically these are the things available. It's very complicated. I mean, you get information. And the world is moving on to new technology called SNP again. So that in perhaps in 5 years or 10 years, we will move to a completely different scenario using different sets of data. So it's a very dynamic field. Okay, so you know how then we got our DNA database, all right? So what are the things that we should, as individuals, concern about? First of all, we should concern about the biological material. At the scene of crime, whoever collects the biological material, it must be obtained through a proper way. And there should be what we call proper documentation, proper collection, recording, how do you store them, how do you deliver them, how do you preserve them, how do you retain them, how do you destroy them. You know? In other words, once you are given your blood, your hair, or sperm to a particular agency, do you want them to keep them forever for you, or after they have extracted DNA, would you want to keep them there, or should be destroyed, and how are they to be used? It should be spelled out very clearly in the law. Alright? So these are the issues. And that's why even in CSI you see in movies, when you go to the scene of crime, what do? They take photographs, a lot of photographs. That is documentation. Alright? It's not just collecting samples, but see how the pattern, the splash pattern of the blood, or what. That tells story. It will tell how a person is killed, how is it killed, is a violent death, or whatever it is.
All these documentation is very important. Then you take to the lab. After all this documentation, that's why what you call a chain of custody is very important. Then send to the lab. And next please, continue. So again in the lab, once you receive the sample, again to repeat the process and be properly recorded, store. After storing, you should be able to retrieve, retain, destroy, analyze, interpret, exchange, transfer. So it involves a lot of steps. In order to exchange and transfer, for example, at the Interpol, international level, once you get DNA level, so you exchange between FBI and UK and so on and so forth. We do exchange because criminals do travel as well. So that's exchange and transfer. So database is very important. So in order to get database, you get DNA. After all this material, extracting DNA, and once you get the data, that data, the DNA profile is generated from materials found at the crime scenes or from individuals, suspects. For example, individual can be suspect, can be convicted person, can be volunteers. All these information are now electronically stored and compared. So when we talk about database or data bank, it's not a bank. Everything is stored electronically. And then once it's electronically stored, then you can use them for many uses. Can use for human identification for many purposes. As mentioned by the previous speaker, in a tsunami case, a mass disaster, very useful for human identification. To link individuals to unsolved offenses, for example, crimes that have been committed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years, we can still link them. To link unsolved offenses to each other. There may be a few cases which have not been solved, but then if you get a DNA out, then you will realize that the same person has been committing the few crimes. Maybe a serial criminal, for example. To identify missing persons, these are being used, the data inside a database. So as mentioned again by the two speakers earlier, information can be used to convict the guilty, to prove that somebody is guilty, or to exclude and exonerate the innocent. The data is very powerful. DNA data is very powerful. It's not always to catch criminal. On the other hand, it's like a sword with two edges. It can be used to prove innocence of a person. So when you look at the Identification Act, I think this act is a very important act or a bill. We should have a look at it. When I look through it, I have many questions. So I share with you my own questions. Are we clear with respect to the purpose, scope, and function of the proposed DNA data bank? In the bill mentioned, in fact, it's not very clear. What is the scope? What is the purpose? What's the function? And then, if you look at the act, they can, as mentioned by the first speaker, there are 7 categories of people, from even drugs, drug user to suspect or detainees. Are we satisfied with the 7 classes of indices listed in the act? So there are 7 classes, and therefore each one is an index. There are 7 indices. If you compare our Malaysian bill, this particular bill, with many other bills, we are not please bear in mind, we are not the first country drafting this bill. So in a way, the question is, do we need to reinvent the wheel when there's already a wheel? Okay, the first act was drafted 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, 1995 in Britain. And since then, there have been many other bills in the country. And if you compare this particular bill with other bills, in fact, I don't remember seeing many that have classified 7 indexes, a lot. Yes? I don't know, maybe it's Malaysia boy or unique situation. Then, as mentioned in the Act, the power given mainly to the head. And the head, are we concerned with the stated qualifications, functions, and power of the head of data bank, and also the deputy head and other officers? There are listed categories in the bill. Who are the ones? And all are pointed to one category of people.